All
Hey,
right. Yay. Welcome to Bible study, ladies. Thanks for joining today. We have a lot of people that are busy, got stuff going on today. So I'm glad you two are here with me. Today we're picking up on 20. We ended, I believe, on 19 last time. If I'm remembering it right, I read this stuff so many times, sometimes I forget where we actually got to when we were together. But we're going to cover as much as we can today in Genesis from 20. I'm hoping to get through 23, 20, 21, 22, and 23. 24 is pretty long, so I think we'll just shoot for those. We're going to read a little bit from Jasher today and talk a little bit about circumcision and what's going on with Abraham. So, oh wait, did we already read this? Did we read 20? Do you remember? No.
we're on 20.
Okay, I thought so. All right, just want to make sure. Okay, let's do a quick prayer. All right. Father God, we come before you today. We're so grateful for this opportunity to dive into your word together, to study your covenant and your promises that you made to Abraham, that we are recipients of those blessings and promises that you gave to him, that we are capable and qualified to be adopted into your glorious covenant. We pray that Holy Spirit tend to be with us and that understanding and clarity will come in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Hold on one sec. I just got a quick message. Actually, I'm going to do another quick prayer because a lot of the people that are supposed to be here are not here because of spiritual attacks. There's a few of them. So I'm going to pray for some people really quick. So Father, for the women who typically attend this Bible study, who have a heart to be here, who are all being attacked by the enemy, I bind and rebuke the enemy in their lives of each of those women. You know them by name, Father. For those who are just feeling discouraged, who have lost hope, those who are being attacked through death of friends, no energy, being bogged down, spirits of death, spirits of sexual assault and attack. I bind and rebuke all incubus, succubus, spirit spouses. I just can't stand before the throne in intercession to pray, to stand in the gap as Yeshua stands in the gap for me. I stand in the gap for them, and I ask that you will remove all legal right of the enemy to stay, that these attacks will be canceled, and that you will loose angels from the heavenlies to come down and tend to cleaning up these attacks in their life, to open up space for them to be able to attend Bible study weekly, that these attacks will especially not come, that this will be an anointed time and day of protection for them to be able to attend and come into sisterhood as we come into your word and study your covenants, Father. I just pray against all of these spirits. I pray that your kingdom come and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, as we step into this kingdom age, walking out of this age of the church. And Father, I just pray that all of these attacks will be removed from these women who seek you, who walk in covenant with you, who desire more of you. These things I pray and ask in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen. I just noticed that we did do 20 and we did do 21 only because I zoomed right into where it says Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old. I do remember that. So I think we're on 22, maybe.
I don't think we did read it because I think it does mention that he was given that to do that.
Okay.
We talked about that, but this is I think that was when he circumcised Ishmael that we read.
Okay.
But he was given the commandment of circumcision. But now this is we haven't covered the birth of Isaac.
Yeah.
So I know what you're talking about and why that because we mentioned the circumcision before, but now it's Isaac. Before it was Ishmael that we covered.
Yeah. It could be just in my memory because of Jasher.
Yeah.
I'm going, and, she was 10 years old and Isaac was 40. Like, what? So yeah, I'm ahead with the
Yeah,
Jasher.
with oh, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. I see. Yeah. We'll hit that in here. It talks about her birth, and so we can talk a little more about that then. I know
Okay.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Things were very different. Yeah. So all right. 20. And Abraham journeyed from thence towards the south country and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur and sojourned into Gerar. And Abraham said oh, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Actually, I forgot I usually use my microphone because it was really annoying. Uh, when I listened to it back, the sound wasn't good. So let me just switch over. Um, did that change at all? Does it
Oh, that's better.
better? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, where'd my, okay. All right. So verse 2. And Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. And God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, Behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, She is my sister? Sorry, I should read that in a different tone. Said he not unto me, She is my sister? And she even herself said, He is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I not to touch her. So Abimelech, God says he prevented him from doing anything, from sinning with her. Um, and he's saying, they told me this, so that's why I took her to wife. So we start to see it unfold, how a lot of times even these weird things that happen or things that seem sinful or wrong, God uses them to his glory to bring interesting things into play. So now, therefore, restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee. So, one thing that happens here is you see the blessings that come into Abimelech's kingdom because Abraham prayed for him. So, this opened up a door for Abraham to need to pray for him. And thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. And this is interesting too, because this is adultery, sexual sin. There are curses of death come over us for sexual sin, which is interesting because a lot of people that I am dealing with spiritual warfare and interceding for, they have a spirit of death on them. And I was just delivered from this a few weeks ago. Sexual sin opens up doors of death, and that appears in many different ways because it can be, um, if it can't kill you, if it can't make you want to die, it can bring death to your finances, death to your relationships, death to your destinies, your purpose, your spiritual gifts. So the spirit of death, the death that's what happened in the garden. We talked about that in Genesis, right? Thou wilt surely die. If you partake of this fruit, you will surely die. And they partook of that fruit. And what do we talk about that fruit was? That was sexual sin that was introduced in the garden through Lucifer, right? And so the partaking of fornication, I'm starting to see that there's this connection of the spirit of death that is almost like an automatic curse that the enemy, if you're going to walk into fornication and take the chances of bringing a child into this world who is a bastard child, who, disease, filling your soul with demonic entities, that opens those doors of death. For us. And so you see that right here. He was going to take her to wife, and immediately God is saying,
he's going to have to pray for you because now you have a spirit of death on you just from taking her to wife. He hadn't even touched her yet. He just took a married man's wife. And I believe in Jasher, it says that, he had married her at this point. And so he's telling him, you better restore him or else you're going to surely die. And that's that same phrase, surely die, is the same thing that we see in the garden.
Mhm.
So interesting connection. Um, and God will kill those that sin against his anointed too, because he's also clarifying there, he's a prophet. You've taken not just a man's wife, but a prophet's wife. So that, plays into this like curse that not just on him, but in everyone, in his kingdom. So therefore, hold on, what did I write here real quick? One of the other benefits of this, yeah, he shall pray for thee. Okay. So therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning and called his servants and told all these things to their ears, and the men were sore afraid. And so the other thing it did is it brought the fear of God into the kingdom. We're supposed to have a fear of God, and there may not have been a fear of God in the kingdom. And so that was a blessing to bring a fear of the Lord into the kingdom. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, what hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, what sawest thou? And thou hast done this thing. Um, and Abraham said, because I thought surely the fear of God is not in this place. He says it right there. The fear of God, he thought the fear of God wasn't there, but it did bring the fear of God there. There, like I said, there may not have been. And if there wasn't, and he didn't say that this is his sister, he may, if he said this is his wife, hear what he says. Surely the fear of God is, he thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. If he's a
Mhm.
prophet of God, we should be open to consider that prophetically he knew that they would have
Mhm.
killed him and taken his wife because they didn't have the fear of God. So because he went about it in this way, it brought the fear of God into the house, and it ended up being the thing that saved her. Because a lot of people look at this and look at it as like, oh, Abraham sinned. But the reality is, in verse 12, he says, and yet indeed, she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. So she is his sister. So they weren't really lying. A lot of people look at that and go, well, Abraham lied. Well, she's a sister. They share the same father. Her father was also Terah, like we talked about last week. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, Terah, that I said unto her, who came with him from their father's house as his sister, this is thy kindness which thou shalt shew unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, he is my brother, instead of referring to me as your husband. So there's, a partial truth there. Um, and Abimelech took sheep and oxen and manservants and servants and gave them unto Abraham and restored him and Sarah his wife. So the wealth of the righteous stored up for the wicked, he ended up blessing Abraham, a prophet. This is a way he received wealth. And Abimelech said, behold, my land is before thee. Dwell where it pleaseth thee. So that's another blessing. He gave him a place to stay. And unto Sarah he said, behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. So it's funny now now he's talking to Sarah, and he refers to him as her brother, even though he knows now that they're married. And he says, I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. So what he's saying here is he is a covering of the eyes. So he's telling her, I've given him silver, and because we've come to this agreement, and this whole thing played out this way, that covering, it's like a clothing. It's like now nobody else in my kingdom is going to look upon your beauty with anything because this played out. We were cursed. We saw the consequences of having to lust after your physical beauty. And so now you have this covering of the eyes over you. That's just who Abraham's going to be to you as your husband. And he gave him all the silver which justified him, which is when it says, thus she was reproved, meaning that he justified or made things right by giving him silver, and basically pronouncing nobody could look upon her with lust by Abraham being this covering of others' eyes unto her. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So immediately when he took her, everybody's wombs closed in the kingdom. Nobody could bear children because it was like, yeah, you're not going to walk into adultery, and he hadn't touched her. And this is where there's a lot more details in the book of Jasher that we don't have time to read, that it goes into everything that happened in Abimelech's courts and the plagues and what was playing out. It has a lot more details in there regarding that piece of the story. So chapter 21, and the Lord visited Sarah and sorry, I was just looking at my notes. And the Lord visited Sarah and had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham. Now this is kind of tricky because this is a whole different time. This happened when she was younger and beautiful, and we had already talked about how God had come and given Sarah this promise and how she laughed, right? And we talked about that last week. And now it went back in time to talk about what happened in Abimelech's courts. And now we're moving back to when Sarah's 90. And now it's talking about that she did conceive. So things kind of jump around a little bit time-wise here. So for Sarah conceived, and she bare Abraham a son in his old age. And I find it interesting that it says things like this because it's always talking in the perspective of the man. It doesn't say, and she gave birth and bare a son, like even to herself. It specifies she bare Abraham a son. She gave it to him in his old age, and set time of which God had spoken to him, or at the set time. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his Isaac, being 8 days old, and God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born unto him. And the name Isaac means he shall laugh, which in the next verse it says, and Sarah said, God hath made me laugh, so that all who hear will laugh with me. So that's why she named Isaac to laugh, because this joy in her old age of, like we talked about last time, she's inside of herself, like, should I have pleasure in my old age? Like referring to it seemed like she was probably had already gone through menopause. They're not even having sex anymore. And now it's like makes her giggle because she's brought pleasure. She was able to conceive a child and have pleasure with her husband and receive a son. And she's like, everybody who hears of this is going to laugh and go, what? Sarah had a baby at 100? It brings that laughter and joy, which is why it's a gift of God. Hold on, I have a note here. What does it say? Yeah. Give the child to the father. So where I really want you guys to pay attention to the way everything's written here, because everything that we're about to read is all about a covenant with God. It's all symbolic. It's all types and shadows of the Father and the Son, of our Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ. Everything with Abraham and Isaac is a type and shadow of that. And sometimes Abraham is even being a type of Christ. Most of the time he's the type of the Father. And usually Isaac is a type of Jesus Christ, but it kind of goes back and forth. And everything that's happening here is pointing to the birth and death and resurrection of Jesus. So even the fact that it says Sarah conceived and bare Abraham. So she bore a child to Abraham. That's a sign of us bearing children to the Father, which is why when we have children, we should covenant them to the Father, pointing to that they are his children. So that's a type, being a type of the covenant that we make with God for our children. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. Weaning, that's also symbolic of moving from milk to meat. And that's something that's used a lot in speaking about gospel doctrines. When we're a child, we can only, what's the word? Digest, palate milk. And then, as you grow up, you mature and you can handle meat, something more meaty to chew on. And so he's moving through this weaning, which is also symbolic of spiritual growth. So he's now going to go from milk to meat. And they celebrate this because, it's pointing to a level of growth spiritually as well, then not just physically, but spiritually. And Sarah, the son of Hagar, Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. So now this is where we'll move over to Jasher, but let me just get through what it says here, and then we'll see it expounds in Jasher on what happened right here. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. So like I said last week, this is the cliff notes that we get, because it's just covering the genesis of where we all come from, the covenants of light and dark. And but this is fun to look at what it says over here in Jasher. Oh, and before we do that, just real quick, we talked about the circumcision of 8 days, and we talked about that last time with Ishmael. And this is interesting to look at why they said 8 days. Even though it doesn't clarify in the Bible, these are just some things that all make good sense why they say why God would have chosen the 8th day. First one, the power of Shabbat queen. I don't necessarily know what that means, but having the circumcision at 8 days guarantees that the baby will experience at least one Shabbat before the circumcision. Guaranteeing at least one Shabbat also brings healing to the soul to have a day of rest before, after they're born and we're delivered. And that's a lot of hard work for a baby to go through, coming from one realm to the other. Guaranteeing at least one Shabbat, healing for the soul, which just entered into the physical material world from the spiritual world. Atonement. Others explain that just as the blood of the offering brings atonement, so too does circumcision. Therefore, just as an animal brought for an offering needs to be at least 8 days old at the time of the circumcision, the baby needs to be at least 8 days old, pointing to that atonement sacrifice. The health of the baby, I don't know what that word is, but explains that we wait 8 days so that the child will be strong enough for the circumcision. So it gives, again, that time of healing. Then both parents can share in the joy, because the Talmud explains, since a woman is considered ritually impure for at least 7 days after giving birth to a boy, during that time, the couple cannot be physically intimate with each other. So to wait days so that both parents would not be mired in sadness during this joyous occasion, so that she can step out of her period of uncleanness and join in the celebration of circumcision. The Talmud tells us that while the baby is in the mother's womb, he is taught the entire Torah. As he enters into the world, an angel causes him to forget all that he learned. Based on this, some explain that we wait 8 days for the circumcision, since in the first 7 days, the soul is mourning its loss. I heard recently somebody talking about having a near-death experience where they saw how somebody had basically been given all of the mission and understanding of their life here before they came. And then they heard a point where they said, and now forget it all. And then they were sent down. And so we read, in the book of Genesis, I don't know if you remember, but I pointed out how it said, and I think it's Genesis 2. It's the very first verse, I believe, and it said, and, in the sixth day that all of the hosts of heaven and earth were finished, pointing to that God created all of the hosts of the earth before. And so there's been division, in Christianity about whether or not we had a premortal life, a pre-existent life. As an ex-Mormon, I always believed in that. And it was one of those things that I never really put down after the fact, even though I heard a lot of other people basically saying, well, you were knit in your mother's womb. So we've covered that a lot, but I fully believe that, what this is saying is not just if it's in the womb, that spirit. I've also heard people talk about they've seen and understand that the baby spirit can come and go from heaven before it's born. And that spirit, having been created at the sixth day, it's being trained and prepared. So natural versus supernatural. The Brit Milah, or the circumcision, is a sign of the eternal covenant and bond between, I'll just say, God's people. Our covenant is supra rational. I don't know that word. Let's look it up real quick. Supra rational. What does that mean? Why is that taking so long to open? Oh, Urban Dictionary. That's not a. Oh, that's weird. It does that sometimes. It only recognized half of the word. There we go. Transcending the rational based on or involving factors not to be comprehended by reasons alone. So it's basically the same as supernatural. It does not dissipate in moments when we don't comprehend why we do what we do. Therefore, the circumcision is a matter of faith. It signifies a bond that is higher than intellect. It is for this reason that we don't wait to circumcise a child until he's old enough to make his own decisions, but instead circumcise him when his relationship with God transcends intellect. And it is for this reason the mystics explain that the baby is specifically circumcised on the eighth day. Since God created the world in 7 days, there are many matters of Torah and mitzvahs which reflect the number 7. There are 7 weeks of the counting of the Omer, 7 years of the Shemitah cycle, and 7 Shemitot of the Yovel, the Jubilee. Thus, the natural world is represented by the number 7. 8, on the other hand, represents supra-rational or supernatural or spiritual, and the infinite or eternal, which if you think about the number 8, you turn it sideways, and that is the symbol of infinity. And that which is beyond the natural order of this world. Therefore, the child is circumcised specifically at 8 days, for the child is entering a religion founded upon faith, whose survival is miraculous, and whose potential in the world is infinite. Ultimately, we don't know the true reason why the circumcision is done specifically on 8 days. But yeah, I think those sound like some pretty good ideas. So now let's move over to Jasher. We're just going to read, I think it's 17 verses. So, and Abraham rose and did all that God had ordered him. This is chapter 18, by the way. Anybody who's following wants to go, and there's a lot of other good stuff, but we're only going to go through 17. And Abraham rose and did all that God ordered him, and he took the men of his household and those bought with money, and he circumcised them as the Lord had commanded him. And there was not one left whom he did not circumcise. And this goes back to Ishmael and his circumcision, but we're just going to start at the beginning. And Ishmael was circumcised in the flesh of their foreskin. 13 years old was Ishmael when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And in the 3rd day, Abraham went out of his tent and sat at the door to enjoy the heat of the sun during the pain of his flesh. And the Lord appeared to him in the plain of Mamre, and sent 3 of his ministering angels to visit him. And he was sitting at the door of the tent, and he lifted his eyes and saw, lo, 3 men were coming from a distance, and he rose up and ran to meet them, and he bowed down to them and brought them into his house. We read through this part last week in Genesis. And he said to them, if now I have found favor in your sight, turn and eat a morsel of bread. And he pressed them, and they turned in and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he placed them under a tree at the door of the tent. And Abraham ran and took a calf, tender and good, and he hastened to kill it and gave it to his servant Eliezer to dress. And Abraham came to Sarah into the tent, and he said to her, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes to cover the pot containing the meat." And she did so. And Abraham hastened and brought before butter and milk, beef and mutton, and gave it before them to eat, before the flesh of the calf was sufficiently done, and they did eat. And again, pointing to angels do eat. And when they had done eating, one of them said to him, "I will return to thee according to the time of life, and Sarah thy wife shall have a son." And the men afterward departed and went their ways to the places which they were sent. In those days all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord, and they provoked the Lord with their abominations, and they strengthened in aging abominably and scornfully before the Lord. And their wickedness and crimes were in those days great before the Lord. And they had in their land a very extensive valley, about half a day's walk. And in it there were fountains and water, and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. And all of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in a year with their wives and their children, all belonging to them, and they rejoiced there with their timbrels and dances. And in the time of rejoicing, they would all rise up and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and some, the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. And each man saw his wife and daughter in the hands of his neighbor and did not say a word. Wow, I don't even remember reading that verse. But we talked about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah last week, and this just talks about how orgies, taking virginity away, sharing spouses, the swinging daughters, and nobody said anything. Just big. It was a huge city of just perversion and sex. And they did so from morning to night, and they afterward returned home, each man to his house, and each woman to her tent. So they always did 4 times in the year. 4 times a year they came together to just have this big sex ritual. Not to mention, the daily sodomy rituals they had out in the courts of the city where they had the beds set up. This was just a party, an extra party. Also, when a stranger came into their cities and brought goods which he had purchased with a view to dispose there, the people of these cities would assemble, men and women and children, young and old, to go to the man and take his goods by force, giving a little to each man, until there was an end to all of the goods of the owner which he had brought into the land. And if the owner of the goods quarreled with them, saying, "What work is this that you have done to me?" then they would approach him one by one, and each would show him the little which he took, and taunt him, saying, "I only took that which thou didst give me." And when he heard from them all, he would arise and go from them in sorrow and bitterness of soul, when they would all arise and go after him and drive him out of the city with a great noise and tumult. I guess that wasn't the end of the verses when we get to where it talks about what happened with did I scroll back too far? That's interesting stuff, but hold on, I just want to figure out where it gets into what happened with Abraham and Isaac. 17. Let's see, maybe was it the previous one? Maybe it was 17. Hold on, let me go back and look, because I searched for it, and chapter 21. Somehow I scrolled way too far. Sorry. Well, that was fun. That was a fun little diversion.
It sounds familiar to me because I'm on Jasher right now.
Yeah.
With Christopher.
Yeah.
Glenn.
Awesome. Let me just see here. 17. Is this it? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I don't know how that happened. I had it all saved right in the right spot, and then I started reading, didn't realize it was different. That's why I was like, I don't remember reading this verse. Okay, so, and it was the time at the end of the year and 4 months of Abraham's dwelling in the land of the Philistines in Gerar that God visited Sarah, and the Lord remembered her, and she conceived and bare a son to Abraham. And Abraham called the name of the son which was born to him, which Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac at 8 days old, and as God had commanded Abraham to do, unto his seed after him. And Abraham was 100 and Sarah 90 years old when Isaac was born to them. And the child grew up, and he was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast upon the day that Isaac was weaned. And Shem and Ebner and all the great people of the land, and Abimelech, king of the Philistines, and his servant, and Phicol, and the captain of the host, came to eat and drink and rejoice at the feast which Abraham made upon the day of his son Isaac's being weaned. Also, Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, his brother, came from Haran, they and all belonging to them, for they greatly rejoiced on hearing that a son had been born to Sarah. And they came to Abraham, and they ate and drank at the feast which Abraham made upon the day of Isaac's being weaned. And Terah and Nahor rejoiced with Abraham, and they remained with him many days in the land of the Philistines, which is those where the giants live. And that at that time, Serug, the son of Ru, died in the first year of the birth of Isaac, the son of Abraham. And all the days of Serug were 239 years, and he died. And Ishmael, the son of Abraham, was grown up in those days. He was 14 years old when Sarah bare Isaac to Abraham. So this is where it starts to explain what we saw happen here in verse 9 in Genesis, where it says that the son of Hagar, Ishmael, was mocking his brother. And God was with Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and he grew up, and he learned to use the bow and became an archer. And when Isaac was 5 years old, which this is so that tells us he was 5 when he was being weaned, because this is when this happened. When he was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. And Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite to him and took the bow and drew it and put it in the arrow and intended to slay Isaac. And Sarah saw the act which Ishmael desired to do to her son Isaac, and it grieved her exceedingly on account of her son. And she sent for Abraham and said to him, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for her son shall not be heir with my son, for thus did he seek to do unto him this day. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarah, and he rose up early in the morning, and he took 12 loaves and a bottle of water, which he gave to Hagar, and sent her away with her son. And Hagar went with her son to the wilderness, and they dwelt there in the wilderness of Paran with the inhabitants of the wilderness. And Ishmael was an archer, and he dwelt in the wilderness a long time. And he and his mother afterward went to the land of Egypt, and they dwelt there. And Hagar took a wife for her son from Egypt, and her name was Meribah. And this is where, when we see it says he and his mother went back to Egypt, when God, remember when he went to Hagar, when she was sad and struggling, he told him that, or he told her that her son, God had prophesied to her that he would dwell with his kindred or with his kinsfolk, something, how he said that. And so I talked about how that said that he would be among his own people. And so, God had circumcised him. Abraham had taught him to some degree, who knows exactly how much about Creator and God. And then they went back to the land of Egypt. So I'm sure somehow God used, this for his glory, but they went back, and this is essentially God prophesying way before, telling her that he will dwell with his people. So we can trust that in all of that grace and mercy that God felt for Hagar when she was struggling, that God had warned her long before, because this was a really hard day for all of them. Because it says in the next verse in Genesis, and the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So even though he gave Hagar this promise, he had told her, okay, yeah, you're going to have these children, but he's going to, or this child, but he's going to dwell amongst his brethren, that he will be among his brethren was, I think, the way that he put it. And so now he's telling him, well, listen to everything that your wife said. He's not the covenant son. He needs to go back and be, with the Egyptian. This wasn't necessarily God's will, but he still blessed her. So, and when it calls her a bondwoman, that word bondage, the bondage points to she was in bondage because of her genetics. We're talking about genes here, because she was Egyptian, because she came from, if she was Pharaoh's daughter, and if he went back into Pharaoh's court, where she came from, where Abraham received her, which I don't know if that was Abimelech, if he was the Pharaoh and the one that gave Hagar to her. I don't think so. I think that was another king, because this thing that happened with Abraham being taken into a king's court and him saying it was his sister, that happens twice in the book of Jasher, and I remember if they're both covered in Genesis, but anyhow, so what does that say? Sorry, sometimes I make notes and I can't read my own handwriting. Okay, so 14 says, and Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba, which that city means well of the oath. And we'll see why here in a minute. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs, which at that time he would have been. It's funny, I've heard people talk about him as if he was an infant or something, but he was like, it just said, 14 when Isaac was 5 and Ishmael was 14, I think, when they got sent away. And she went and sat her down over against him a good ways off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him, which means across from him, and lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, what aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. So the boy was crying, he was thirsty. They were about to die, and he says, arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. When it says he opened her eyes, he was essentially showing her a vision. And he leads her to where the water is through vision. And she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. And this is interesting because in Jasher, it expounds about this wife. And it talks about how Abraham went out to visit him, and Sarah didn't really want him to go. And she made him promise, if you're going to go, you can't even get off the camel. And so he pulls up to the tent in the camel, and Ishmael's not there. He's out hunting, and he can hear Ishmael's wife in the tent, and she's beating the children, and, just a terrible mother. And she comes out. She doesn't know who Abraham is. I can't remember if he asked her for water and she said no, or if she just didn't offer anything. But he told her, he said, tell Ishmael, tell your husband when he returns that a man came, and this is what he looked like. He was an old man. He looked like this. And tell him to, he said something to the effect of, put this nail out of the tent. He told her to tell him that. So then Ishmael comes back, and she tells him this message, and he realizes and knows and discerns that was his father, and that what he was saying is that he needs to get rid of this wife and go find another one, replace it with a different wife, because she was just an evil woman. So he does. He ended up putting her out, and went and found a better wife. And then Abraham comes back again and checks up and does the same thing. Sarah says, don't even get off the camel. Ishmael's not there again. And she blesses him and brings him food and water. And she's, kind, and he says, okay, yeah, keep this one, leaves a message for her, tells him to keep her. And then later down the road, Ishmael ends up going back to live with Abraham. So that's what's fun about Jasher. Again, it just goes into all the details, and there's interesting stuff in there. And it came to pass, 22, and it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee. Thou shalt do unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. So now Abimelech's coming back, after he's almost like scared of Abraham. He's like, promise me that God won't deal with me falsely. So this is showing that fear of God showed up in his kingdom, and now he's asking Abraham again to bless him and swear not to do any harm to him. And Abraham said, I will swear. And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water with Abimelech's servants. Because, let's see, a well of water which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And Abimelech said, I wot not, who hath done this thing? Neither didst thou tell me, neither yet heard I of it but today. So he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't know this happened. Why didn't you tell me? And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them, and made a covenant. So here again, you see Abraham making a covenant with the king. And so he's acting as almost like a vassal king. So even though this man is a king, Abraham is in covenant with God, and Abraham is a type and shadow of God, and here he is making a covenant with the king to promise to protect him, and that they'll have peace between them. And so again, type and shadow of this king making a covenant with God. He's asking him. He says, swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me. And so Abraham's behaving as an intercessor here. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, what mean these 7 ewe lambs? And he says, what mean these? So that's also another interesting question to the reader to say, why 7? There's always a reason, right? What mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, for these 7 lambs shalt thou take out of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. So this is prophetic. These are 7 lambs, a completion, perfection, pointing that he digged a well. If he's the father, if he's a symbol of the Father and he digged a well, the water of life is Jesus Christ. 7, a number of completion and perfection, and a covenant being given with the king, pointing to Jesus Christ, right? And let's see. Okay, that's everything I just said. Just checking on my notes. Symbol of God's covenant with Abraham on earth as it is in heaven. Let's see, 31. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear, both of them. So that's why it's called the well of the oath, that city, Beersheba. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. And then Abimelech rose up, and Phicol, the chief captain of the host, and they returned into the land of the Philistines, which that name Phicol, that means mouth of all. He probably speaks for the king. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba and called thereon the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. So I kind of wish now I would have actually gone and found, because this part of the story is interesting, but I'll just tell you what happens. in Jasher, it talks about how there's a conversation happening between so everything I just talked about, and then I say how later Ishmael comes back to stay with Abraham again after he's married there. And so, because when this all happened, Ishmael is older. You know, a lot of people think maybe he was a young boy or something, but he was actually like, I think maybe 37 or something. I can't remember. I think Jasher might even say how old he was. But he was an adult. And um, him and Ishmael were having a conversation. And Ishmael is saying to Isaac, "Oh, yeah, when I was 13 years old, you know, my father circumcised me and I let him and I held perfectly still and I didn't even budge, you know, and bragging about how he got circumcised and how well he handled it." And then Isaac is like, "Oh, what have you to brag about this little tiny piece of your foreskin?" And he's like, if I, if my father wanted to take me up on the mountain and lay me down as a burnt offering and a sacrifice unto the Lord, I would let him kill me for my God, you know, kind of thing. Like, and so this whole thing, it says in there, and God thought it well to test Abraham in this matter and Isaac. And so Isaac was the one who like actually conceived this idea in his mind. And I'm sure, you know, God gave him that because it probably made him willing. It probably gave him a willingness to walk into this situation the same way, you know, Jesus Christ went willingly to the cross, right? And so he's the one who came up with the idea, just pointing again to Isaac's being a type and shadow of Christ. He went willingly. Um, so I'll read that again. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham. So God will tempt us in a different way. Tempt, try, send us through a trial, a season of um a refiner's fire, approving to prove ourselves loyal to the Lord, right? So, and said unto him Abraham, and he did say, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son. And he refers to that to know, because what is Jesus Christ? He's the only begotten son of the Father, right? And so it's another reason that Abraham, he calls him his only son Isaac. Isn't that interesting when he had Ishmael?
Hmm.
God didn't count him because even though Sarah gave him to his wife, he still considered him a bastard child.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show you that polygamy is not in God's plan, which I know I bring that up a lot, but for any Mormons who ever watch, ex-Mormons who ever watch this, I want you to know, you know, he only recognized one son, your only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell of thee. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him. That points to there needing to be 2 witnesses in order for this to be, you know, accounted unto the Lord. God does everything by 2 witnesses. So he takes these 2 young men with him, and I'm sure he needed help carrying everything too, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. And I think I mentioned too as well, Jasher's fun because it goes into all the different things that Satan tried to do to stop him as he went up the mountain to take Isaac. You know, he tried to appear and tell him, "Oh, this is certainly not God. God wouldn't tell you to kill your own son." And he's like, "Get thee behind me, Satan. You know, I rebuke you." He knew that it was Satan, even though he appeared to him as this old man. And so, oh, and this is interesting too in this verse that I just read, verse 5. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again unto you. That word worship, that is the first time that word appears in the Bible, in Genesis, worship. And so I feel like it shows another level of where they used to walk with God and hear from him. Now he's going to worship him, to pray to him, to praise him. Even though he's going to do this hard thing, he's still going to go and praise the Lord. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hands and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father. So this is some specific language. It's almost like God is having them speak in such a way where the son is speaking to his father, and his father says, and he said, Here am I, or I am. He's speaking to the I am. And so he says, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And so I think at this point was when Isaac realizes, wait a minute, there's no lamb. And I don't think he knew on the way up the mountain what they were going to do. And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb, which on one hand, he's telling him that it's him. On another hand, he's telling him that God will provide a lamb because he did provide a ram. And on another hand, he's prophesying Yeshua, coming of Hamashiach, because it's almost like this threefold prophecy when Isaac is questioning his father, like, wait a minute, what's going on? There's no lamb here. I see wood. I see fire. I see a sword. Like, I don't see a lamb. What's going on? And then it's like, oh, the father, Abraham said, God will provide himself. And he says he will provide it for himself for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to a place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And so at that point, he's telling him, well, God will provide. And then I think at some point they'd discussed this and he realized, oh, that's going to be me. And in Jasher, it goes into how Isaac is totally willing. He's like, okay, yeah, he's didn't resist at all. And he was gung-ho about it. And he's like, Father, make sure you bound my hands tightly so that I don't resist and I'm not able to wiggle. And so when it talks right here and it says he laid the wood and bound Isaac, Isaac asked him to do that so that he wouldn't struggle. And he laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, which the angel of the Lord is Jehovah. So this is interesting because this isn't the voice of God. This is the voice of Jehovah. It differentiates by calling it the angel of the Lord. Called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. So that shows, the Father and the Son are one, Jehovah and God being one. But it's appropriate that as he's going into slay his son for this sacrifice, that it would be Jehovah who comes and says, no, this was just a test. And that he's the one who's coming because he's the one who's actually going to step into this role, down the road. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. So there's the prophecy. You've got where he just said God will provide a lamb when Isaac asked, and Jehovah shows up, and he laid down the first symbol of the lamb, Isaac, and then the real lamb, Jehovah shows up and says, stop, I'm going to be the one that does this. And right now we're going to have this other animal come in for this part of the season until I actually come. And so there's this whole like threefold thing happening again right here. So he sees this ram, offers him in place, and Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh. That's another proof that this was Jehovah. It means Jehovah will see. That's what Jehovah Jireh means. He called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen, because Jehovah saw what Abraham did to prophesy into the future of his coming. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time and said, by myself I have sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son. Again, clarifying that that covenant comes through Jesus Christ and that he's only recognizing the one son of Abraham because of the lineage of which he comes through, the genetics. That in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seeds shall possess the gate of his enemies. And so this is a prophetic of that in the Son of God, in whom he said he was well pleased, that Yeshua inherits all the inhabitants of the earth that we're adopted in. And so this prophecy for Abraham is also a prophecy to Yeshua, because he purchased us all with a price. And so we all are adopted in. And so him being the father of these many nations points to Yeshua's sacrifice as well. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. And so his seed, because he was willing to offer up his son, it's almost like this supernatural thing happens in the loins, in the seed of Abraham, to bless his lineage, to prophesy Jesus coming forth, and that all other nations would be blessed, not just the nation of Israel, but that all nations would be blessed, even though he would multiply him in his seed. Now he's talking about the blessing of all the nations of the earth, because we need to be adopted in, the Jews and the Gentiles coming into covenant, right? So in thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice, meaning because of the sacrifice of Jesus, that anyone could now come into the fold. And it wouldn't necessarily just be the seed of Abraham. It would be anyone, because of the sacrifice that was just offered. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, behold, Milcah, she hath also borne a child to thy brother Nahor, whose his firstborn, and or Huz his firstborn, and Buz his brother, and Kemuel the father of Aram, and Chesed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and wow,
Jidlap.
Jidlap, sure, and Bethuel, and Bethuel begat Rebekah. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. So that was kind of an interesting turn of topics where, all of a sudden it talks about after this happened with Abraham. Why does it bring that forward? Because this is Genesis. So why does it list who all these people are? Because specifically it mentions Rebekah. And Rebekah, we know, is who? She becomes the wife of Isaac.
Right, Isaac. Yeah.
And so that's, I think, let's see, that's Isaac's wife was maybe his second cousin or Abraham's great niece, because it was Abraham's, let's see, my brain doesn't work when I get on here. I did this last night in my head. Okay, so Milcah, okay, things that was told to Abraham. Milcah, who married his brother Nahor. So that's Milcah's his sister-in-law, Nahor's his brother. Then it lists some of the kids they had. And then Bethuel, who is one of the sons of Nahor. So that Bethuel begat Rebekah. So Bethuel, Rebekah's father, was Abraham's nephew. So Rebekah would have been his great niece. I think that's how you would look at that. And so it would have been, I think, the second cousin of Isaac. So yeah, that's fun. Here we got the prophecy of his wife already coming forward. All right, 23. I think this is going to be that'll be our last chapter. And Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So 127. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba. Kirjath Arba. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. It's interesting that he calls his wife his dead, my dead. One thing also in Jasher that is really sad about this whole situation. I actually was a little bit like, not mad at God, but I was like, really, Lord? Really? Because, Satan comes to try to, like I said, stop Abraham from proceeding up the mountain. And there's this whole other piece of the story that when God told Abraham to go up and take Isaac to offer him as a burnt offering, he's like, how am I supposed to get him away from his mother? Because she's like his prized possession in life. She didn't have him until she was 100. So right here, she died. Oh, well, here's our answer, because it says she was 127. So that means Abraham would have been 27 years old when Abraham took him up the mountain to sacrifice him, because she gave birth to him when she was 100, right? So Isaac's 27, she's 127, and she dies. And what just happened that this leaves out is Abraham's like, God, how am I supposed to get him away from Sarah? He's her like pride and joy, her only child. They have a very close relationship. He hadn't married or left the house. And it even says that before he took him up the mountain, because God told him what he should tell him is that he was going to take her to the house of his brother Noah in order to go get, not his brother, his father, or his father's house. I can't remember, his uncle, his relation to Noah. He was going to take him to Noah's house in order to have him trained up in the Lord. Maybe it was Noah. Now I can't remember who his father in the Lord, he was taking him. I think it was Noah. And so he was going to take him there to be trained up in the Lord. And which, he lied to Sarah because he didn't want to tell her, I'm going to take your son to go sacrifice him up on the mountain after all this pain and sorrow of her being barren for so many years, finally getting a son. He's 27 years old. He takes him up, and she's a mess, because after Satan goes and tempts Abraham and tries to get him not to do it, and he keeps rebuking him, then he goes down to the house and appears as an old man to Sarah. And he says, Abraham took Isaac up the mountain to kill him. And so then Sarah's like freaking out. And so she tries to go and look for him. And then she just thought he was dead, figured they had been successful, couldn't find Abraham and Isaac. Comes back down. She's in the tent, basically bawling. And then I think Satan comes to her and tells her, "Oh, I was just kidding. He's up the mountain." I could be totally messing the story up, but it's something like this. Isaac is Isaac's alive. Never mind, just kidding. He didn't kill him, I think was what kind of Satan came back and eventually tells her after she'd been crying and mourning. And she leapt for joy, and she like jumps up to go run up the mountain, and she like has a heart attack and dies because she was so joyful in the spirit because her son was not dead. So this is actually, it goes into how she died. And it's kind of a really sad story because she goes through major emotional trauma with her son going up and then coming down and thinking he's dead, and then him not being dead. And then just like her heart fails her. because he's alive. But also, you think about like the joy of a mother that her son is alive. It also is there's some other level of prophetic word there about the joy of our hearts, that our
Mm,
hearts will leap for joy, that Yeshua rose again on the third day, when we thought he was dead,
mm,
when we thought he had died, that he rose on the third day, and that she ended up, her heart was so joyful because of her son lived. That's also prophetic, that the joy of the Lord in our hearts can't be contained
yeah.
almost unto death, because he is risen. So that just came to me. I hadn't even realized that before. That's that parable piece of the puzzle. All right. So 6, I think we're on. Or 5. And the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my lord. Thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres, bury the dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury the dead. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. And he communed with them, saying, If it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and interpret for me to Ephron, son of Zohar. By the way, the reason I think that they are out kind of in the middle of nowhere, he's not back at home and he's having to like negotiate with them to find a place to bury her, is I think because she leapt up and tried to run to go and find him. And so they weren't in like their city where they should have been residing. There on somebody
Oh,
else's land. Um, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, with which he hath, which is in the end of his field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place among you. And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth. And Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even of all that went in at the gate of his city, saying, Nay, my lord, hear me. The field I thee, and the cave that is therein I give thee, in the presence of the sons of my people. Give I it thee, bury thy dead. And Abraham bestowed down himself before the people of the land, and spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me. I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. So he mentions in 13, he says, in the audience of. In 10, he says, it talks about Ephron the Hittite in the audience of. The children of Heth were all there, and everybody at the gate. So that would be the judges and the witnesses. So he's actually laying out contract law in the kingdom of land, of jurisdiction. So he's going into jurisdictional ownership of land here, which is symbolic in the kingdom. And he's pointing to that there needs to be witnesses. It says went in, even all that went in the gates of the city. Those all witnessed this. They were all the audience, and at the gate of the city is where the judges resided. And so, there was a lot of witnesses in order to do this exchange for this land. And I think we see later in Jasher that there was a dispute about this land down the road, that somebody tried to claim that they didn't give the land to Abraham after all these witnesses, which is, I think, why they're going into all this depth of laying out. There was all these witnesses. And Ephron answered and said unto Abraham, saying unto him, My lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead. So at first he wasn't going to take anything. He's like, just bury your dead. I don't need anything. And again, kind of like Abraham did with the other king, he was like, no, I don't want anything of yours. I don't want you to give me anything, because, I don't want you to be able to go and say that Abraham became rich because of you, because I took your spoil. It was the king when when they took Lot, right? And he went and took all of the spoil after he killed all of these men. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephraim, and Abraham weighed to Ephraim the silver, which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money, with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field, and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in all the borders round about, were made sure. Which I'm like, what does that mean? The trees were made sure. And so I went and tried to look up that word in Hebrew. And the closest thing I could figure out that explained what happened here was that the trees being made sure, um, on the borders. So for whatever land he was giving him to have this cave to use the land for burying, those trees were like marked or established somehow. That it was noted that these were the boundaries of the land that Abraham had purchased. Unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth before all that went in at the gate of this city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, the same is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And the field of the cave that is therein was made sure unto Abraham for a possession of burying place by the sons of Heth. All right. And pointing out again that it talks that this is in the land of Canaan, and God had promised him that he would inherit all of this land. So I think this also might be drawing out the first purchase of the land, the first land that he owned to bury his dead in Canaan, as God had promised him to give him the land of Canaan. So, any questions? You guys have any questions or comments?
No, just awesome.
Yeah, interesting stuff, huh?
So interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating to look at all the details of fallout of the Nephilim, the fallout of the wars, the fallout of all the sins, and then to look how God, is so early on establishing his covenants with man and preparing to bring forward the Savior. So,
Yeah, it's
stuff.
just how everything ties into today, where, we're seeing, there's reptilian people.
Yeah.
There are reptilian people.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
Hybrids. The hybrids are here, that's for
Yeah.
sure. And they always have been, as we
Yeah.
just said. Check this out. Here's the Bible.
Hmm.
We're this far in. That's how many pages we've been reading
Yeah.
for 7 weeks. We're that far in, and we've had the whole earth destroyed, the Tower of Babel, Nimrod being wiped out. We've seen how many generations of people have just been utterly wicked since the fall of Adam, and
Yeah.
we're only that far. So
Yeah. And it just makes, sense with everything that's going on in the world today, with all this, with
mhm.
the blood, with that. I did my on my Instagram a post that mentions the reptilians. It's a slide of like
Mhm.
10 posts, but one of them was about the reptilians. I was like, I
Mhm.
have to put that in.
Yeah.
I had went to Lake Mead with my daughter and my ex-husband, and we got to talking that with Genesis. And when I got home, I said, I got to put something up about the reptilians, the shapeshifters.
Mhm. And let's just quickly talk about why, because some people go, well, how or why, or that's not real, or, whatever. Uh, and it makes sense when you realize the Nephilim come from fallen angels.
Yeah.
And those fallen angels are called seraph or seraphim or
Yeah.
Elohim, but they were, I believe Lucifer was a seraphim. They have the different categories of angels. I think Elohim just refers to a spirit being, but I think the category of angels that the fallen angels came from, I think they also, we know there's 200 that were bound, and then we know that there was others that also fell. And so who knows how many of them have ended up conceiving and procreating with the children of what do you call them? The children of men, the son of men, because
Mhm.
they were the sons of God, conceiving with the children of men. And so angels have the ability. What does God tell us in the Bible? He says, uh, be careful lest ye entertain angels unawares, right?
Mhm.
So as we just saw that they can eat, what does that also mean? If we can entertain an angel unaware, then what does that tell us about them?
Yeah.
They have the power and ability to shapeshift. They can
Yeah.
appear in different forms that we don't recognize their spiritual nature. They can appear as a flesh being. They can appear in an angelic form. And
Yeah.
so they have this ability to change, and God gives gifts without repentance. And so their children, when they're hybrids with humans, what does that mean? It means that they inherit their parents' giftings. So
Yeah.
they're able to shapeshift.
Mhm.
And if their parent is a fallen angel, then their truest form would probably be an ugly serpent, look more
Yeah.
like an ugly serpent than a human. And
Yeah.
so to shift and hold the human form to walk among men, or to appear in ritual form as a serpent or a reptilian or a
Yeah.
whatever, I've heard they look different in different ways. And going
Yeah.
down the
Own-
generations,
yeah.
what, say again?
There's all different forms of the reptilian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure they look and appear differently, but somebody who interviewed me on one of her channels, she put out a video and I've posted it, and you can
Yeah.
see her eyes flickering into the snake, the slits,
Yeah.
and in her mouth. Okay, well, let me tell this first real quick, because before I even saw this video, God always does this with me. He prepares me to receive something, because I was still kind of like, yeah, I've heard about that. I don't know. I've never met anybody that's actually seen it. Um, Actually, I did. And I'll tell this story really quick. Remind me to come back. I'm going to tell you about the woman and how
Okay.
God prepared me. And I'm going to tell you about this other thing that happened, because years ago, when I was doing ayahuasca. Actually, it was before I started doing ayahuasca. I got into that. I started with combo, and combo is frog medicine, and it's a toxic poison, which they say it's actually not poison. They just call it that. It can be poisonous to other animals and stuff if they try to eat it. But it's the green tree frog in the jungle, and it has a coat of slime on it.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
go and collect these frogs. The shamans sing to them. They don't go and capture them. They sing to the frogs, and the frogs, they hold their hand on the tree, and the frogs crawl onto their hand. There's videos of this. You can see the shamans out in the jungle, like singing to these frogs and calling them in. And then they don't kill them. They just take a wooden, like a popsicle stick, and they scrape it off, and then they use like a mirror and they wipe it on and collect all of this. And then they put that all onto not a mirror, like a piece of glass, or like a big wooden, like a wooden plank, if it's like that big, kind of looks like a ruler or something.
Mhm.
Smear it on there, let it dry and cure. They mail it to the States, and the people who do it here anyways, where it's collected from the jungle. And then they spray the stick. It's reconstituted with water. They take a little incense, start it on fire, burn your skin, like in a few dots. And so the first few layers of your subcutaneous layer of skin opens up, and they take a little ball of this frog poison and put dabs on there. And you fast for at least a day before. You drink a whole bunch of water. And then what they say that it's supposed to do is go in and gather up all the toxin, chemicals, free radicals, metals in your body, pull them all into the gut, even emotions, negative experiences, traumas, put them in the gut, and then you purge. And this purge is supposed to be a spiritual cleansing. Um, and so it's an idol if you are a Christian, because Jesus is supposed to be able to, like, the blood of Jesus is supposed to regenerate you in that way. But so I was at a ceremony. It was the very first one I'd ever been to, and I met this guy there who's an ex-Mormon. He had long curly hair. He was very traumatized. He'd been through something kind of wild. I was one of the only other ex-Mormons there. And for some reason, he really clung to me and wanted to talk to me. And he started telling me about how he'd been studying mysticism for a long time after his Mormon mission. He like got out of that. And I actually, looking back, I think he came from probably a Illuminati bloodline. And he, where did it start? Oh yeah, he had these friends he was studying mysticism with, and he said they were basically like his closest brothers. He'd known them for years. You know, they'd studied deep stuff together. They'd learned to walk like the mystics. You know, he didn't go into all the details, but he's like, I literally have friends who can fly and like have those abilities. They have crazy wild powers, and some of these guys can actually fly. And so while he's talking to me, he literally is really weird guy, because he talks like this. He's very animated, and I just thought he was just kind of a weirdo at first. But then he started explaining to me what he was doing was actually, it's like sign language, but it was not just with hands like this. It was with his entire body. And he said it was an ancient language. It was an ancient temple language that was spoken, and it was channeled through him. And he had this ability to speak the spiritual language. And so when he was speaking, he was basically doing a visual show of an ancient language of ancient secrets or something. And it was very strategic. It doesn't look like what I was doing. And sometimes it was with his legs too. It was a kind of a strange thing, but he's a very nice guy. And so it became just like who he was. So, you know, by the third day we'd been talking, and he starts to tell me how, why he's here at this ceremony, which is too bad that he didn't know about Jesus after being Mormon, that he didn't go to Jesus for this healing. But he'd been completely traumatized because these men that he'd studied mysticism with, as he was doing this language and being given this gift and ability that they saw him walk into and start developing, after a time, they started telling him, you can't just walk around doing that with whoever you talk to. That's an ancient sacred temple language, and it's just not for laymen to see. You can't use this language and speak this language in front of the eyes of other men. Because, you know, that's how the brotherhoods, the Illuminati is. It's secret. That's what the occult is. It's all secret information. So they don't want, you know, just regular old humanity to see or experience any of their secret mystical ways. So they had warned him against continuing and doing this. And he said, no, he's like, no, thanks for your advice. I'm going to do what I want. You know, like he understood, like he has a relationship with the divine, and that was between him and the divine. And he didn't need to listen to them. They weren't his master. Why would I listen to you? I feel fine doing this. And so they kept warning him against it. And he just kept ignoring them. Like, yeah, whatever, bro, go do your own, you know, you have your own gifts, your own abilities, your own power. You do you, I do me. So he dismissed them. And these guys were getting kind of heavy handed about it. Well, he's sitting in his room one day. He lives out in the middle of nowhere. He's also one of those people that like has pictures on his social media of him like standing at the window, just holding his hand out, and a bird will just fly up and land on his hand from a wild bird. He had gifts to call in animals and stuff like that. And so it's magic. It's the occult people have, you know, these abilities to do things like that. And so he lived out in the middle of nowhere. He was very kind of wild, shaggy dude. He didn't usually walk just among everybody. He was an out there kind of guy. But so he was sitting out at his house with his room closed, in his room, sitting on his bed doing something. And all of a sudden his bedroom door opens, and these two men walk in his room. And he says they didn't even say anything. What they did was all of the sudden they shut the door behind them, and they stand before my bed, and they reveal their true faces to me. And he said, and upon them revealing their true faces, it wasn't even so much the look of their faces, but the energy that they put out towards me to invoke just this fear in him, this intimidation, this energy of fear and intimidation over him, and threatening him psychically. You better stop doing this. Like, we're telling you, you better stop, or else, you know, got this threat. He was so traumatized. I said, their true faces, they revealed their true faces to you. I said, what does that mean? This is the first time I'd ever heard anything like this, you know? I said,
Yeah.
what does that mean? And I said, what did it look like? And he said, I will never tell a soul because I don't want to remember it. I don't want to replay it in my head and have to describe it. And two, I don't want for anyone to ever even have to try to imagine what that looks like. And it's clear to me looking back that it had less to do with what they looked like than he was carrying that energy that spirit of fear that they
Mm.
directed into him through magic. And I carried this story, and I know God sent for me as a Joshua Caleb in the land, being a spy unto the Lord. God had many experiences like this show up in my life where people would just come and kind of like verbal diarrhea, Freudian slip all over me and tell me stories that I was supposed to have to gain understanding. And so I just believe they were Nephilim shapeshifters. And that's where, a lot of these in these mystics, these circles, these secret societies, that's where these people with these powers and abilities are hiding out. And so, Nephilim shapeshifters probably revealed a reptilian face. And not only do they have that power, they also have spiritual power and abilities. And it's a dark magic. And it's used like a direct energy weapon at him. And so that was the first time I'd heard about anything like that. And I saw this guy face to face. He was not a man that he should lie. There's no way he was making this up. I watched his trauma for 3 days while we were there. He slept in the room next to me. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. We all slept in a room together, but he sat by me. We would all just bring basically like yoga mats and a pillow, and we'd all crash in the same room for several days when we would do these medicine ceremonies. But then fast forward to this lady who interviewed me. I had some question marks about her when she first interviewed me. But she later, I had other survivors tell me she was doing things after the interviews, like she would lace in tracks in their interview of like serpent sounds in the background to trigger people who were under MK Ultra and stuff like that.
Mm.
And God had already shown me a vision that she was still in the Illuminati, that she was not a survivor as she claimed to be, that she was still cult active. So after I know and understand all this, I still followed her channel a little bit and would see her videos that would pop up. And one day one popped up, and I don't even know why I was watching it. Sometimes I watch stuff I have no interest in watching it, but I just feel like this pull into it. And it was only a short, like 10-minute video. And one of her people didn't show up for an interview that day. So she's like, I just wanted to hop on and give a quick message. And I have to go back. Okay, pause. I forgot. I have to give the preparatory. So before this, somebody on Instagram had been posting about reptilians or shapeshifters. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe. And I'm still like, okay, where's the clone evidence? Like, I hear people talking about clones. I'm like, I don't know if you can grow a baby that fast. Like, I mean, I believe it's possible, but I also haven't heard anyone, an eyewitness, technology to really go, yeah, they're doing that. They're growing full blown human beings that can come out and walk amongst us and act. So I was kind of in that same place that I'm at with clones right now when it comes to like reptilian and shape shifting. Like, I'm open to it, but I don't know. I don't have any firsthand proof. Well, I was talking to this guy about it, and for some reason, actually I just commented on one of his posts, and he felt drawn to send me all this information. He pops on private message and he's like, watch this, read this. I've been saving this stuff for years. I promise you it's real. Really wanted to convince me, sent me files of YouTube channels and videos that he'd been saving up in playlists for years. And I went through and watched a lot of them, and I was kind of bugged because a lot of them were just really bad quality, like really fuzzy. I'm like, why are these videos of supposed shape-shifting reptilians always such horrible quality? Like, you can't capture any good footage of it. I don't understand. So that kind of bothered me, but I watched it all and I was trying to figure it out. And there was this one thing that stood out to me that was common thread throughout a lot of these videos. So then this woman that I know personally, that I've had an interview with, who she pops on and she's talking, and while she's talking,
I saw
you
her.
can see it. Yeah, you can see in her mouth
Green.
this
Or-
green.
Yep.
It looks like green lightning, almost like as if she took a energy
saw it.
retainer, like an energetic green light retainer, and set it back behind her teeth so that when she would
Yeah.
talk, it looks like it's coming like up out of her mouth and her throat. And
Yeah.
it's very apparent. And it's like,
Oh,
what is
totally.
that? And I just kept staring at it. And I watched the entire video and just stared at her mouth the entire time. And I was like, something's going on there. And also just the way she was talking, like I
Yeah.
could feel like that programming, like a hypnotism type thing she was trying to do. And other people I've shared it with, they're like, that pisses me off because she's speaking truth. But she's also talking about, I mean, there's a little bit of Hegelian dialect. They
Mhm.
spin truth with lie. So I get off and I was just like, huh, that was strange. So then I send it to one of my closest friends and I said, check this out. I said, are you seeing anything here? And her daughter, who's 14, watched it. And she called me back later and she said, my daughter's been literally in a ball crying for the past hour after watching that. She was so traumatized by seeing it. And she's like, and it's not because of what she saw in there. It's because she realized it brought back almost like I've seen that before when I was a child. It made her realize like I think her,
Yeah.
because she was another survivor, and she's like, I think that her father's bloodline probably had some of that, and she may have seen that.
Mhm.
So it's like it brought back a memory. And then I had another survivor call me 10 minutes later and go, you got to see this video that I landed on this morning. And she's like, I can't believe it. She didn't tell me who it was, nothing. She got like 3 minutes in to explain it. I'm like, girl, I already know what you're talking about. I saw it this morning pop up too, and I already watched it, and I know exactly what you're about to say. And so like a whole bunch of people in the community were like, dude, you're not holding your form. You have a full blown video that you posted and you're shape
Yeah.
shifting in it. She didn't take
Mhm.
it down. I'm sure she's seen it because she went and removed my interview from her channel after I didn't publicize it for about 3 months. I waited and prayed on it until I felt like God was saying, yeah, like God aligned all of that for a purpose. I think what happened, her client didn't show up, not client, her another survivor she was planning to interview didn't show up for the interview. So she was irritated. And that's what a little bit emotion will make it harder for them to hold their form. So now
Yeah.
she's talking. Oh, and what else they told me, go back and watch and now pay attention to her eye, because I hadn't caught on to the eye thing. I only saw the mouth thing. And that's all what I saw in those videos that guy had sent me the week before. It was the green light in the mouth.
Yeah.
And I think what that is probably the power of the kingdom of darkness that illuminates or ignites. It's almost like a green electricity in order
Mm.
to cause the shift into the other form. And I think that was what was the camera was catching. But I know God aligned that in order to bring witness to many people to go, here's somebody who's sitting right before your face, who's shape-shifting a serpent. And now that not only is there Nephilim
Yeah.
hybrids here that are, of that lineage, but they're still, shape shifting and all that, at the higher levels, but just consorting with normal humans, out in the
Yeah.
community. It's not like this is the president. It's not like I know I've had visions of the prophet of the Mormon church, Russell M. Nelson. I've seen him in vision shape shifting
Mm.
into a serpent. You go look at a picture of him. He looks like Gargamel. You can tell he's a very wicked man.
Yeah.
Uh, not human, right? And so they usually keep those that form that they take, for rituals or in other realms. I've had people, survivors tell me that they've seen people shapeshift in the middle of having sex with somebody, that at the
Oh,
point of orgasm, that's when they'll shapeshift into something completely different.
this is horrific.
Yeah, right. Can you imagine? Anyway, so yeah, shapeshifters are real.
Totally.
Abraham made a covenant with God because let's
Yeah.
make that relatable. Abraham was given a covenant with God because we needed it to have our blood regenerated, because many of
Yeah.
our ancestors are not human because they had sex with the fallen, and we are living again. I'll remind you again, as it was
Jesus.
in the days of Noah, it would be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. It's here. So pretty much all flesh has once again been defiled. So
Mhm.
repent ye, say repent ye, call on the Lord.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right, ladies. So good. We'll see you next week.
Great. All
Have a
righty.
good
Have a
one.
blessed day, everyone.
You
Thank you
too.
so much.
Bye.
Have a blessed day.
You're
Bye.
welcome. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.